Stay High Cave. On the afternoon of February 11th, 2011, 26-year-old undergraduate student David Rosler decided to explore Stay High Cave in Virginia with a friend. The cave is named Stay High because that is exactly what you must do to avoid getting stuck in the entrance where the floor narrows down into a tight V. If a person let their body drop too low into the narrow trench, they risked sliding into a section too tight to escape. Despite having no prior caving experience, David chose to go in alone. As he tried to keep himself on the upper ledge of the V-shaped passage, he misjudged his position. Slowly and unknowingly, he inched downward toward the narrowest part of the gap. Then the ground shifted beneath him. In an instant, he was sliding uncontrollably down the slope. He tried to stop himself, but the walls were smooth and offered no grip. In seconds, he was trapped in the tightest part of the passage, his body wedged tightly between the walls. He tried to push himself up or twist to gain leverage, but the cave held him in a merciless grip. Every movement only increased the pressure on his limbs. As minutes turned into hours, panic took hold. His breathing became shallow, his strength began to fade, and he started to understand how serious his situation really was. David's friend, who had gone hiking nearby, noticed he hadn't returned. When he reached the entrance of the cave, he heard faint cries for help echoing from inside. Emergency services were called, and the Newport Rescue Squad was the first to arrive. They quickly realized the situation was far more complex than they had expected. Reinforcements were called in, including the Blacksburg Rescue Squad's confined rescue team and members of Virginia Tech's VPI Cave Club. The sun had already set, and temperatures dropped rapidly. Inside the cave, David was exposed to the cold. Hypothermia became a growing concern. Rescuers stuffed heat packs into his clothing and even used a hairdryer to warm his body. But the wind chill inside the passage had dropped into the single digits. His leg was trapped at an awkward angle, and every small movement sent waves of pain through his body. At one point, rescuers considered the extreme option of breaking his hip to free him. They worked through the night, using power tools to chip away at the bedrock. Every centimeter of progress was slow and painful. As they hoisted him up, he would often get stuck again, forcing the team to remove more rock. David was drifting in and out of consciousness. His movements slowed, his voice weakened, but the rescuers kept going. Finally, at around 3 o'clock a.m., after nearly 12 hours of nonstop effort, they were able to lift him free. His body was limp and exhausted. He was immediately flown to Montgomery Regional Hospital, where he was treated for severe hypothermia and a crush injury to his leg. The rescue had been a success, but it came terrifyingly close to a very different outcome. Schetromph Cave Tragedy. On January 24, 2011, 4 young adults from the Johns Hopkins Outdoor Club, 2 men and 2 women, decided to explore Schetromph Cave in Pennsylvania to evaluate its potential for future club trips. They arrived around 2:30 p.m., excited to explore. At first, everything went smoothly as they navigated the cave's twisting passages, but during their exit, disaster struck. One of the young men reached a notoriously difficult section of the cave, a narrow, hourglass-shaped passage that turned sharply before tightening into a tight, body-sized tunnel known ominously as the corkscrew. To get out, he would have to go headfirst. With a mix of caution and determination, he lowered himself into the passage on his hands and knees, but he misjudged his entry. His left leg folded awkwardly against his chest as the walls closed in. Within moments, he was completely stuck, upside down, head pressed against cold rock, body jammed at the narrowest point of the passage. His friends acted quickly. The 2 women tried to pull him free, but the angle was impossible. They couldn't get enough leverage to move him. After about 20 minutes of failed attempts, one of them scrambled out of the cave and called 911. Inside, the situation worsened by the minute. The trapped man could feel the crushing pressure of the stone on his chest and limbs. His twisted leg throbbed, but that pain was nothing compared to what was happening in his head. Blood pooled downward, building unbearable pressure in his skull. His vision blurred. His thoughts became scattered. The pounding in his head matched the beat of his heart, each surge sending waves of searing pain through his temples and neck. As first responders arrived, a local man overheard the call on a radio scanner. He immediately contacted his friend, Jerry Bowen, an experienced caver. Within minutes, Jerry and his son Stephen were on the road. When they arrived, they met with the deputy fire chief of the Morningsville Goodwill Volunteer Fire Department. Neither Jerry nor Stephen had ever been inside Schetromph Cave, but the rescue team had a problem. No one on scene was small enough to reach the trapped man. Stephen, being the smaller one of the 2, was chosen to go in. He was quickly equipped with safety gear, water, hearing and eye protection, an air quality monitor, a compressed air tank, and an air chisel. One of the women who had emerged with a camera to show the trapped man's position offered to guide Stephen back in, helping to carry supplies. When Stephen finally reached the victim, He found him wedged so tightly in the passage that there was no way past. He handed supplies forward, and the trapped man was given a small amount of water by one of his friends still nearby. Stephen then crawled back to retrieve the air tank and returned to begin the difficult task of chiseling away at the rock. It was slow, delicate work. He had to chip away the rock without injuring the man just inches away. At one point, a steel plate was requested to protect the trapped caver from the chisel. When Stephen returned with the plate and a fresh tank, the situation had worsened. The man had slipped even deeper into the constriction. Despite the setback, Stephen kept going. With one friend pulling from above and Stephen pushing from below, they managed to reposition the man's body slightly. Then Stephen resumed chiseling, slowly removing the final rock projection. Finally, after hours of effort, the man's leg popped free. The moment Stephen radioed that the victim was out, a wave of relief swept over everyone on the surface. Exhausted and shaken, the freed caver drank some water and rested briefly. Then, with help from the rescue team, he began the long crawl back toward the surface. Two confined space rescue professionals met them near the exit to assist with a 15-foot climb. From there, he was flown to a nearby hospital. Surprisingly, despite everything, he had suffered no serious injuries. Lower Van Horn Cave. On April 11, 2009, a group of 6 experienced cavers, 24-year-old Teresa Garrity, 30-year-old Richard Bowman, Patrick Clapp, Ed Coleman, Mike Landrum, and Colin Pauche, set out to explore Lower Van Horn Cave in southern Arizona, a system known for its steep, mud-covered slopes, narrow passages, and a history of dangerous flooding. The cave offered little margin for error and demanded complete concentration from anyone who dared to enter. The group met before sunrise and loaded their gear in the pale morning light. Richard, the most experienced among them, had already gone over the plan twice. No shortcuts, no unnecessary risks, and constant communication. Their descent began steadily. The passage sloped downward at a gentle angle, but the further they went, the tighter and more treacherous the terrain became. Thick mud coated the cave floor, clinging to their boots and turning each step into a calculated effort to stay upright. After nearly an hour underground, the group reached one of the most dangerous sections of the cave, a narrow traverse that curved sharply around a deep, still pool of water. The path they had to cross was barely 2 feet wide and sloped downward at an unforgiving 90-degree angle. One wrong move here wouldn't just result in a fall, it would mean sliding helplessly into freezing water with no easy way back up. Teresa volunteered to go first. She pressed herself against the damp wall, inching forward carefully while scanning the rock for stability. Every movement was deliberate. Halfway across the ledge, she spotted a solid-looking boulder, a perfect handhold that extended just far enough from the wall to give her a bit of reassurance. She reached for it, and the moment her fingers tightened around it, the rock gave way. It happened in an instant. Her weight shifted, her boots lost grip, and the slick mud beneath her offered nothing to stop the fall. She slammed into the slope chest first, the impact knocking the air from her lungs as she slid backward, feet above her head. The angle of the slope gave her no chance to stop. She fell 15 feet. There was no control and no time to react. Her helmet struck the rock first, followed by her shoulders and torso, as her body slammed into a narrow fissure and was pulled downward into the tightening crack. She became wedged almost instantly. Her arms were pinned above her head, her chest compressed, and her spine contorted under immense pressure. Her breathing became shallow and strained, and she quickly realized she could no longer move. Just below her, less than 3 feet down, was a deep, cold pool of water. If she had fallen slightly further, she would have plunged straight into it, disoriented and likely unable to surface. The rest of the team had seen her fall. They rushed to the edge of the traverse, their headlamps sweeping the darkness until they spotted the top of her helmet and a small section of her torso lodged tightly in the crack. Richard immediately assessed the situation. Ed Coleman turned back to retrieve vertical rescue gear they had left at an earlier section of the cave, while Mike Landrum started crawling through the winding tunnels back toward the vehicles to get additional rope. The others remained at the scene, digging through their packs, trying to improvise a solution. Inside the fissure, Teresa's world was shrinking. Her back cramped as her body adjusted to the unnatural position. Her lungs burned, her fingers tingled, and her head throbbed from the helmet impact. She tried shifting her body, hoping for even a few inches of relief, but any movement only caused the stone to grip her tighter. The first rescue attempt involved lowering a 30-foot length of webbing anchored to the rock above. Attached to the end was an etrier, a flexible webbing ladder with several foot loops meant to provide upward traction. They carefully lowered it down to her position, hoping she could hook into it and climb out. But her helmet was pinned so tightly that she couldn't tilt her head down to see, and her arms were too numb to coordinate blindly. After several agonizing attempts to catch the etrier with her feet, it became clear that the plan wouldn't work. Her legs were too tightly wedged to move freely, and the angle was all wrong. They quickly shifted to a second plan. This time, they lowered a climbing harness along with two handle descenders, mechanical devices that could grip the rope and allow her to inch her way upward without sliding back. Reaching her with the gear was a challenge, but once the equipment was in place, Teresa forced her barely responsive hands to grab the harness straps. She managed to pull the harness into position and began fastening it with slow, deliberate movements. When she clipped the first descender onto the muddy rope, it jammed immediately. Gritting her teeth, she adjusted its position, wiped off the mud as best she could, and tried again. This time, it held. Slowly, inch by inch, she began to move. Using her elbows and knees to brace against the stone walls, she pushed herself upward, ignoring the pain that radiated through her spine and shoulders with every motion. Her progress was painfully slow, but she refused to stop. Eventually, her fingers brushed the edge of the fissure. Her teammates reached down, grabbed her by the forearms, and in a single, coordinated effort, pulled her free. The moment her body cleared the crack, she collapsed onto solid ground. Her body was completely drained of strength. The team didn't waste a second. They helped her to her feet and guided her carefully through the winding corridors of the cave. Hours after her fall, they emerged into the cold night air. The stars stretched wide above them, and the crushing weight of the cave finally behind them. Teresa Garrity had survived. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe for similar ones and feel free to drop suggestions for the next video in the comments.